want to expand the conversation now with someone who was there on January 6th. CNN law enforcement analyst Michael Fanone. He's a former D.C. Metro police officer who was attacked by that mob and was injured responding to the attack. Michael, thank you so much for sharing part of your afternoon with us. Your response initially to the sentencing of Stewart Rhodes, the head of the Oath Keepers.
I certainly think that the guilty verdict and a significant sentence like 18 years is appropriate, though I would have agreed more with the government's recommendation of 25 years.
And Michael, I'm curious, we heard from his attorneys, they repeatedly kept saying that the Oath Keepers meant to deter violence that day. Obviously, we're watching video of the mob targeting law enforcement officers just like you. I'm wondering how you respond to his attorneys saying that he's being convicted for his words, he's being sentenced for his words and not his actions.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I would expect a defense attorney to say, but the facts spell out a very different story as to Stewart Rhodes and the organization which he led participation in the violence that was January 6th. This is a group that came to the Capitol prepared, that made preparation in advance of January 6th. They trained, they stockpiled weapons and ammunition in preparation for that day. There was a great deal of organization and effort facilitated by Stewart Rhodes as the leader of the Oath Keepers. And obviously we saw the violence that played out that day. And all of this was in an effort to overturn the results of a free and fair election. An election that had its challenges brought through the court system 60 plus times, and each time found to be upheld and legitimate.
And yet,
which is why we see the conviction for seditious conspiracy.
Right, absolutely. And yet we see so many of the former president's cronies and the former president himself repeat the lie that there was widespread fraud in the last election. And on that note, we spoke to an attorney, legal expert in the previous hour, who said that part of the reason for Stewart Rhodes' strategy of remaining unrepentant through all of this legal proceeding is because he believes he may receive a pardon if the former president is reelected. I'm wondering what you make of Stewart Rhodes potentially being pardoned down the road before serving a full sentence, despite the obvious harm that the court ruled that he caused.
I mean, it's outrageous. It should outrage all Americans. You know, Stewart Rhodes was convicted by a jury of his peers for his actions, which resulted in the injuries sustained by myself and hundreds of other police officers on January 6th. Not to mention the fact that America became a national and international embarrassment on the world stage. But I think that this is part of a strategy, not just a strategy on behalf of January 6th defendants like Stewart Rhodes, but also a strategy on behalf of the former president. You know, if the former president was to admit that it was in fact a free and fair election, then he would also, you know, in turn be admitting some degree of culpability for the violence that took place that day. January 6th, Stewart Rhodes, I think, is he is looking for a pardon. It's sickening that that the former president would have aligned himself with individuals like this in the statements that he made in his town hall and continues to make on a daily basis.
Officer Michael Fanone, we appreciate your service on that day as we watch video of the ugliness that unfolded, and we appreciate you speaking out since then. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
The leader of the Oath Keepers has just been sentenced for his actions in the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Stuart Rhodes, the founder and leader of the far-right group, was the first of 9 defendants who were sentenced, the judge finding that his actions amounted to domestic terrorism, and for that, he will be serving 18 years in prison. We have CNN senior crime and justice reporter Caitlin Polance joining us now. Caitlin, walk us through what happened today inside of court.
Well, Brianna, this was a very intense sentencing hearing today, one where Stuart Rhodes expressed no remorse for what he did on January 6th and continued to espouse his belief that the election of 2020 was illegal and that he was a political prisoner. But before the judge gave him his sentence, he was sentenced to 18 years in prison and also some years of supervised release after that. The judge was very straightforward with Stuart Rhodes about what he did, why seditious conspiracy was so significant of a crime, one that strikes at the heart of American democracy. He said to Stuart Rhodes, this is the judge, Amit Mehta, "You are not a political prisoner, Mr. Rhodes. That is not why you are here. It is not because of your beliefs. It is not because Joe Biden is the president right now." The judge had many things to say to them. Some of the other things he said was that he believes that Rhodes is making clear today in court when he spoke to the judge, expressing no remorse, that violence could be something that achieved his goals and that he continued to be a threat to democracy. The judge clearly took that to heart and was saying that we cannot have this. We cannot have citizens believe that violence is the way to get things done in a democracy. And the judge also expressed some concern of whether there would be another January 6th, that any elections in the future, there will be fear around them because of what happened on January 6th. But 18 years is quite a significant sentence, by far the longest that any January 6th riot defendant has received for federal crimes on that day. And by my calculation, it puts Stuart Rhodes in jail somewhere near or after 2040, which is 5 presidential elections from now. Brianna?
Caitlin Polance, thank you. I want to bring in Evan Perez now. Evan, let's just be clear about how we got to this point. What Stuart Rhodes did leading up to January 6th and even after January 6th.
Right, and then that's part of the key evidence that the prosecutors presented at this trial. They said, and they showed evidence of the amount of coordination that they say Stuart Rhodes and some of these other members went through before January 6th. There was efforts to do some training, military-style training, militia-style training in North Carolina, for instance. So they stockpiled weapons in a van in Northern Virginia with the idea that, if and when the former president, President Trump at the time, were to declare and invoke the Insurrection Act, that they could be the foot soldiers. They would be the militia that would cross over into Washington and help him keep power. Even after the dust had settled on January 6th, even after it was clear that Donald Trump would be leaving, they vowed to keep fighting on. They vowed to prevent the new president, the lawfully elected president, Joe Biden, from being able to take office. So those are the things that prosecutors were successful in playing for the jurors, showing them photographs, showing them some of the messages that were being exchanged, that persuaded that jury to come back with the extraordinary thing, which is to convict these people on seditious conspiracy, essentially trying to overthrow the U.S. government. And why you see this very stiff sentence today from this judge, 18 years, the longest that has been given to anybody in these cases related to January 6th.
Yeah, saying that it amounts to domestic terrorism, really something to hear the judge say that. Evan Perez, Caitlin Polance, thank you.